I had a life-changing experience. The clouds parted and I heard the voice of 1,000 angels singing the hits of Katy Perry. I hate recurring nightmares. Okay, here's what really happened. I had a life-changing experience while I was a passenger on the back of a motorcycle ridden by a middle-aged man from Louisiana. But his dad body aside, this was no regular middle-aged man. His name was Freddie Spencer, and he ruined my life. And right after this, I'll tell you how. El Camino is brought to you by Yamaha, revs your heart. Importations Thibault, distributor of power sports parts and accessories. And by GP Bikes, Canada's power sports authority. Welcome to El Camino. Freddie Spencer. I guess I need to tell you about Freddie Spencer. Most people know him as a 3-time MotoGP world champion road racer. And back in his day, they raced nasty two-strokes. And in 1985, he did the unthinkable. He won the 250 and the 500cc titles in the same season. Enough people fawn over ex-champion riders, and I'm not going to do that. But I am going to talk about the differences between him and us. "20 years ago, Spencer ran a road racing school in Las Vegas that I attended. Now, by this point, I'd hung up my flat tracker steel shoe and was riding on a paved course for the first time. And what a first time it turned out to be. Now, Spencer, by this point, was mostly a figurehead for the school. He let his instructors do most of the teaching. But in the middle of one day, Spencer donned his leathers and offered to take students for a spin on the back of a sport touring Honda VFR. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not that keen on riding in the back of a motorcycle. Something about needing to maintain control, and as you know, as men, we're taught that riding pillion is a bit of a sissy thing to do. But I climbed aboard and braced my hands against the fuel tank. Off we went, for the single most impressive and demoralizing 8 minutes of my life. I had no idea that a motorcycle was capable of what Spencer was doing. He was smooth, but not just regular smooth. He was peanut butter spread on the back of a fluffy kitten smooth. Now, I could tell he was shifting gears because, well, we were going so fast he couldn't still have been in first gear. But that little lurch that happens when we shift, Spencer didn't do that. And that irritating helmet bonk that happens under braking because the rider on the back is jolted into the rider at the controls, well, he didn't do that either. And I could feel both wheels flirting with traction. We were dancing around the track. Rather, he was dancing, and I was a 185-pound infant in a baby Bjorn carrier on Spencer's back. And it seemed such a waste that the track was 20 feet wide because Spencer only needed 4 inches of pavement because his lines never varied. He wasn't human, at least not the kind of human I'd ever encountered. After 3 or 4 laps of the track, Spencer pulled in. I hopped off, and he took another student out for a spin. I sat down and came to a horrifying realization. As a motorcyclist, I was a hack. This isn't false modesty, and I'm not blowing smoke up Spencer's ass. But that day changed my life, because Spencer began to haunt me. I've always ridden with riders much better than me. I know where I sit in the pecking order of skill sets. I'm a good club racer, I'm reasonably fast and reasonably smooth. I have a good sense of self-preservation, and I've never been a crasher. But that ride on the back of that motorcycle changed everything. I was a good hockey player in my day, fast and mean. It's too bad my hands were better at punching than finding the top corner of the net, but as a skater, I had wheels. And just about every week when my daughter was little, I'd take her to the rink on Saturday mornings, and we'd skate with new Canadians from Africa and Southeast Asia, and a lot of other countries too. And they'd look at me in amazement as I whizzed by pulling my daughter by the hand. A Somalian woman wobbled up to me once and said that what I was doing was impossible. I laughed and said that when you start at age 3, there isn't much you can't accomplish. And then it hit me. Spencer would look at me as a motorcyclist just as I looked at the Somalian woman as a skater, as a rank beginner. Ouch. This is what I did about it, and what I continue to do. Every time, and I mean every time I shift gears in my manual transmission Volkswagen, I imagine Spencer sitting beside me and judging me, always judging. If the car lurches after a shift, I imagine a dismissive glance. And when I brake, if the car so much as bobs its head as I come to a dead stop, I feel his disappointment. And when I'm riding a motorcycle, it's way worse, having to drag his ass everywhere I go. But there's an upside to this. My consumption of brake pads has gone way down, and when I carry a passenger, our helmets rarely ever knock together. And if they do, I double down and work that much harder to be smooth. Freddie Spencer won't leave me alone, and I'm thankful for it, most of the time. This segment is brought to you by Yamaha. Welcome back to El Camino. Here's news that none of us want to hear. Most motorcyclists are, at best, mediocre riders. And after a lot of effort and a lot of practice, I'd say I'm high mediocre, or maybe I'm just flattering myself. Let's make an analogy. I've taken up the guitar so I can forge new neural pathways in my brain. And it's heartening to make progress. And if you've got half a day to spare, I can play you a 3-minute song. Here's what a professional cellist said to me. She said that she can get away with a day of non-practice. If she skips 2 days, she can hear the difference in the quality of her playing. If she skips 3 days, she said an audience can hear the drop-off in how she sounds. 3 days. For someone who sacrificed her youth and boyfriends and family vacations to practice, practice, and practice. Now compare this to motorcyclists. Over the winter, we might watch a race or two online, or maybe do a little light cardio at the gym, or cut our booze back in January. February is a different story. And then spring comes, that first really nice Saturday in May. And we jump on our bikes and rip out of the driveway and hit the twisties and battle it out in the freeway and pass on the solid line and chase down the punk in the R1. And we don't think a thing of it. And maybe this is why so many of us will die. Hold on, you say. Well, what can I do about it? Most motorcycle fatalities are because of idiots in cars. Sorry, that's just not true. If you're going to die in the saddle of your bike, statistics show that it's probably going to be because you overcooked it in a corner and crashed, all by yourself. We die because we're not very good. Think of that cellist, all the work she puts in, and no one has ever died from a poorly played cello. Mind you, this doesn't hold true for the violin. Violin fatalities are a real thing. Just talk to any parent whose child is learning to play one. Well, now that we know what the problem is there a cure for it? Well, there is. In the summer, I trekked down to Eastern Ontario for a one-day rider safety course headed up by a man named Dave Grummett. Grummett's an ex-racer and has taught at racing-oriented schools for years. He sells insurance now, and he convinced his boss to rent a racetrack for a day in an attempt to bestow his knowledge to a mix and match group of riders. The thinking went something like this. If riders crash less, insurance rates come down. Well, I'm not sure anything in life comes down, let alone insurance rates. But if an insurer is willing to rent a track for me to learn something, well, I'm in. The day was eye-opening. One man, a cruiser rider, brought his wife, who'd just learned how to ride. He was giving her lots of advice in the way that we men do, mansplaining. She went first through the slalom course on her little Honda. She was sure and steady and precise. And then he went on his big bike, but instead of applying handlebar pressure to turn, he tossed his shoulders from side to side as if he was trying to fling a monkey off his back. Actually, I'm pretty sure he did have a monkey on his back. That's none of my business. And he wasn't the only rider I saw struggle. And as astounding as this may sound, many, many motorcycle riders do not grasp the fundamentals of riding. I'm not being glib. I learned some things that day too. I was astonished after a braking drill when an instructor asked why I always dropped my eyes to the ground when I was stopping. I didn't have an answer, not even a smart-ass answer. It was just a bad habit, one that I've mostly cured myself of. Motorcycling is incredibly demanding, and two-wheeled vehicles are astoundingly complex in their function. Here's what the quantum physicist Michael Brooks said about bicycles. Forget mysterious dark matter and the inexplicable accelerating expansion of the universe. The bicycle represents a far more embarrassing hole in the accomplishments of physics. If you doubt his words, just mention the words countersteering the next time you're in the company of a group of motorcyclists. Then sit down, put your feet up, and enjoy the fireworks. This segment is brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts. Welcome back to El Camino. This episode of El Camino, discounting the commercials, is a little over 22 minutes long. To fully address the lore and legend and misconceptions that surround countersteering, you'd need a Ken Burns miniseries like the 32-parter he did for PBS on baseball. I don't quite know why we motorcyclists struggle with the concept of countersteering. Perhaps the relative simplicity of the automobile is to blame. Turn right, go right. Turn left, go left. And since you're strapped in a car's seat, you can wiggle all you want, but you're not going to make a bit of difference to the vehicle's handling. Now, compared to a motorcycle, which, as you know, is a far different beast, if you push on the right handlebar, you upset the equanimity of the vehicle and it rolls onto the cone-shaped right edge of the tire and, just like a paper cup that rolls in a circle if it's knocked on its side, the motorcycle turns. This is a gross oversimplification, but what interests me is less the theoretical physics of the motorcycle and more our continued struggle with a concept that most of us mastered when we were snotty-nosed kids. I spoke to a woman who runs an off-road riding school, and I asked her how she addressed the topic of countersteering. Her eyes widened and she took in a big gulp of air. "I've tried," she said, "but it messes with people's minds so much that I had to stop." She went on to say that some of her students would become so confused by the concept that they nearly lost the ability to ride at all. And this is the root of it. Our brains are just too big. When you're 4 or 5 years old, your brain hasn't yet been inundated with reams and reams of information, of theories and counter-theories and conspiracy theories. Maybe we should encourage 5-year-olds to vote. An interviewer once asked a champion motorcycle racer a detailed question about his technique. The racer looked at him, dumbfounded, and replied that he'd never ever thought about technique. He just did it. This rider responded physically to the motorcycle, not intellectually. When your parent or older sibling let go of the bicycle saddle and you wobbled off down the laneway for the first time, there wasn't talk of technique. And as the father of a daughter, I can attest that you don't further burden your relationship with a young girl by giving advice of any kind, ever. And in a day or two, every kid has a grip on the function of a bicycle. But adults are different. We don't trust what our bodies inherently tell us. We need to understand everything, which is fine if you're writing your doctoral thesis on the inherent instability of gyroscopic peculiarities of bi-wheeled vehicles. But life is short, and if you want to ride a motorcycle with any degree of competence, set physics aside and just get to work. Back when I went to Freddie Spencer's school in Las Vegas, the lead instructor was a man named Nick Ionach, and he's now a principal in the Yamaha Champions Riding School. The school travels across the U.S. for 24 dates at various facilities, and if you're financially able, It's a great way to give your riding a boost, whether you're a street rider or a racer. But if money's tight, and when isn't money tight, Yamaha and Company have an online program they rather grandiosely call Champ U, Champ University. I just went through it and I'd encourage you to consider it. And this isn't a paid endorsement. I bought the online school for a little under $100 out of my own pocket. If you can put up with a little cheesy humor, there's much to chew on in Champ U. The school's instructors are mostly ex-racers or current racers, which can make me suspicious. It isn't often the most gifted in any particular pursuit or the best at teaching it. But Yamaha is too much of a grizzled veteran to let that happen. The online school has a rigid curriculum, and there isn't any machismo in it either, much the opposite. The mantra of the school is no surprise to anyone who's ever ridden on the back of a motorcycle piloted by Freddie Spencer. That mantra? Smoothness. Riding a motorcycle isn't much different than playing an instrument. Think about it. Isn't it just a giant cello? My Ducati may be more of a double bass, but the principles espoused by the Champ School are much the same as those of a music teacher. What we're looking for is flow. Let's back up. Some of you may think that I'm overthinking this. After all, you've ridden for years and you're still here, so why all the fuss? Well, it's a good point. But the more intimate relationship we have with our motorcycle, the more rewarding it is to ride. That it's safer and faster, well, that's just a perk. I love motorcycle racing, and I still do it. And I love it because it demands from me the kind of focus it's hard to summon for everyday life. When you're on a bike at speed, everything superfluous to the task disappears. On a racetrack, you don't have an incommunicative ex-wife, a persistent credit card balance, or a cantankerous child. You are in your moment. But there's more. And this, for me, is why technique and practice is essential. Our bodies, when confronted by risk, revert to a primitive state. It's often referred to as the fight or flight instinct. But what does that mean? When you're on a motorcycle at 150 miles per hour, your body senses risk. Understandably, you are at risk. Here's the fascinating part. In order to manage that risk, you need to be fully in control of the vehicle beneath you. But to be in control of a motorcycle requires suppleness. Just as you can't play the banjo if your hands are coiled into fists. You can't sense what a motorcycle is communicating to you if you're petrified. It's this, what should we call it, this duality that makes riding so challenging, so exhausting, and so rewarding. If it wasn't for the last point, why would any of us risk our lives and spend all of our money doing it? This segment is brought to you by GP Bikes. Welcome back to El Camino. According to the Champ School, this notion of smoothness is the basis from which you build technique. But those of us in the cheap seats tend to equate smoothness with slowness. It's the other way around. When you watch a racer navigate a series of S-bends, it looks like they're flinging the bike this way and then that way. But watch it in slow motion. They're as fluid as water pouring through your foundation and flowing over to the sump pump. But why is this smoothness paramount to both safety and speed? Maybe smoothness isn't the best word. Maybe progressiveness is the word we're looking for. A motorcycle compared to a car has an embarrassingly small amount of rubber on the road. And if you shock that rubber, either by grabbing the brakes or whipping the throttle open aggressively, you're not giving the motorcycle time to let its weight transfer into the tire. The Champ School curriculum has video demonstrations to prove their point and exercises that you can do to work on it yourself. Some motorcyclists find the complexity of riding daunting. Being blitzed on a racetrack by a 14-year-old who's riding a bike that's not nearly the equal of yours can be demoralizing. I've been there, often. The novelist Eudora Welty wrote something that's always stuck with me. "We are all the breakers of our own hearts," she said, meaning that our successes or our failures are not ultimately due to the actions of others. I'll never have the intuitive control over a motorcycle like Spencer or the instructors at the Champ School have, but that's not the point. The point is that I can get better. I can make myself better. Every night when I sit down with my guitar, the gains are small, so infinitely small that I wonder if there's any progress at all. But over the course of a week or a month or a year, the improvements are significant. Of course, there are nights when I'm all thumbs, but I've learned to laugh at myself, to set the guitar down, to pick it up a few minutes later, and then to try and try again. Becoming a better motorcyclist isn't magic. It's not beyond you, but it does take work. But if I can drag myself to the gym 5 days a week, I'm certainly capable of doing the work to make myself a better rider. One last thing. After 20 years of dragging Freddie Spencer around, he's never once offered to chip in for gas or to pony up for a takeout burrito. But that's okay. I owe him far more than I can ever repay. Thank you for watching El Camino. Clothing was provided by Importations Tebow. El Camino has been brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts. Wherever life takes you, Best Western is there. AGV Helmets. Protect like a champion. And by Spring Toronto Motorcycle Super Show.